So Tom, tell us how this region of Yorkville is exceptional for growing grapes.
Well, Yorkville Highlands is part of Anderson Valley. It's the southern end of Anderson Valley, and we're a little bit higher than the valley floor, so we have the ability to grow different varietals. The valley floor tends to be more Pinot, Chardonnay, Gewurz, more cooler climate, where we start at that here in Maple Creek, and then at 900 feet elevation where our vineyard is, it goes up to 2,200 feet where you can grow the Bordeaux varietals such as Cabernet, Malbec, Merlot, and some Syrahs and Sauvignon Blanc, things like that. So we offer our soils, our slope, and the weather conditions here allow us to grow a lot more varietals than the valley floor. But geographically, we're still in Anderson Valley, but we have our own appellation known as Yorkville Highlands, which is 47,000 acres, about 14 miles long. From the post office south is Anderson Valley, and then from the post office going north from the post office is Anderson Valley, south is the Alexander Valley. So Anderson Valley is Navarro River drainage, and Russian River drainage is the Alexander Valley.
Excellent. And what about the soils and the fog bank that comes in?
Well, the soils do have a lot to do with this area. We're sort of rocky, sandy loam. The hillside vineyards tend to grow more, I believe, a better quality fruit. The vines tend to struggle a little bit more. We do get ample water here, even in the drought years. We've got close to 100 inches this year, which is very rare. When I first moved here 24 years ago, tomorrow is my anniversary, we were averaging around 86 inches a year. And then the drought years, we were getting down to 19, 20, 23, last 6, 7 years. In the last 2 years, we've had some pretty good rainfall. So, and we have a lot of underground water here. I have 7 springs on this property, incredible water, delicious. It's right here. I should have bottled this.
That's great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the vines have to struggle through the soil. How does that help the growing and the
Well,
character?
my experience as a farmer is that grew up in a Portuguese fruit farming family where my grandfather taught me a lot about farming. And when the plants have to struggle a little bit more, especially grapevines, it just develops, they're a little slower growing. They don't yield as much as the valley floor because the soils aren't as deep. Then you get rocks and things in there, but that adds to the character of the fruit. And so that I find to be, when you're making wine, a real asset.
That's terrific.
And the fog, because we're 36 miles from the coast, we get early morning fog. It burns off about 9:30, 10, and it holds in. It comes in the evening time. So the grapes can, in the summer times, can be up in the 80s and 90s during the days, even over 100 now, and then cool off to the high 40s in the summer at night and in early morning. So we always pick early in the morning when the grapes are concentrated. They swell up during the day and they shrink at night, so we get them when they're small.
That is awesome. Yeah. So what grapes are you growing currently now?
Currently, I'm growing Chardonnay, our delicious estate Chardonnay.
Double gold award winning.
We have 3 double gold vintages in 20, 21, and 22 on the shelf. Our 18 and 23 are gold medal. So other people think it's good too. But we grow the old Wente clone, which turns out to be the clone that was in the Paris wine tasting of 1976 when Chateau Montelena won Best White Wine in the World, and the grapes came from the Bacigalupi vineyard. And how I know that, you wonder? Okay, well, I was listening to a podcast, Wine Camp podcast, and they interviewed the Bacigalupi people, and she explained how their grapes were the ones that were in that winning Chardonnay. So the good news is we grow that here. The bad news is, well, bad, it's not a high yielding grape, meaning that on a good year I get 2.5 tons an acre, where most of my Chardonnay grower friends out there are getting 6 to 9 tons an acre. But it's a different quality of fruit. I'd rather have less higher quality fruit than more mediocre.
Oh, that's great, Tom.
And then we also grow Pinot. We did grow Merlot, but we grafted our 3.5 acres of Merlot over to Pinot. We grow the 667 Dejon clone along with the Pommard clone of Pinot Noir. Because Pinot and Chardonnay do really, really well in this climate. We also do have a little Cabernet out there and a grape called Flora, which is a hybrid of Gewürztraminer and Semillon developed by Dr. Omo at UC Davis. And it's a delicious white wine, and I make a natural wine out of it. And I also do it barrel fermented and neutral French oak.
Wow, so I think we'll dedicate another podcast about all your barrels and your picking of the grapes and when you know the fruit is right. So what would you suggest added acreage? You've got more acreage that can be planted. What would you suggest would be a great varietal?
Well, it's interesting you ask that question. I've got 164 acres on the property. We had a slope analysis done, and we have 60 plantable acres on the property here. I'm such a lover of Chardonnay in this particular clone that I would plant more of this because it's such a high quality fruit and it's very rare. And even if you can find the clone, I don't know. I haven't been to the growers to see if the Wente clone is available. But what we've done is we've taken our own budwood, which is the canes in the wintertime drop all their leaves and the little buds start to form on the canes. Well, we cut those, put them in the refrigerator, and then we graft them on. So you can take the budwood and graft the Wente clone onto other chunks of a rootstock or whatever. So it's possible. Pinot Noir, excellent. Up in the higher zones, our property goes up to 1,600 feet. I think Zinfandel would be really good. Syrah would be good. Mourvedre, Grenache. My neighbors above me are growing Grenache, Mourvedre, GSM, and Syrah. So those grapes do well in this area as well, at a little bit higher elevation.
Excellent. So in closing on this particular segment, is there anything about the grapes more to say?
Anything about the grapes? Well, there's so much. Oh my God. Farming is really key. I'm a winemaker and a farmer, so I don't have to argue with myself about how I want the fruit. So as I tell people in the tasting room here when they come to visit, because they always taste the wines, and what I hear more often is, boy, we go wine tasting a lot, and I've never liked every single wine. And I don't even like Chardonnay, but this is the best Chardonnay I've ever had. So what it is the thing as a farmer, I don't pick on sugar like a lot of winemakers do. I pick on seed color. You say, you pick on seed color, what do you mean? Well, in the grape, in every grape, there's seeds. And with climate change, for example, in 2021, I was in the vineyard in August 31st. It was 114 degrees. We normally pick around the first, second week of October up here in Mendocino, in this area. So I took a sample of about 200 berries from a 3.5 acre block. From the top of the cluster to the bottom, the middle, the shade, the sun, just a random selection up and down the vineyard in a baggie, and I smush them all up and I pour the juice onto a refractometer, and that separates the water and sugar, tells me a sugar reading, which is called Brix, B-R-I-X. And I normally pick the Chardonnay around 24 to 24.5 Brix. Well, August 31st, 114 degrees, sun's screaming, sugars are rising. I test the juice, it's 24 Brix. I'm ready to pick, right? No, because I lay the baggie over a piece of white paper and I look at the seeds. The seeds are 100% still green. Wow. Well, how many times have you bought a peach at your local store? It's gorgeous, but it's as hard as this table. And then you got to put it on the counter for 10 days to get soft. you bite into it, it's never ripe. How many times have you had a wine that's got 13.8 alcohol, and you smell it and you go, there's nothing there, and you taste it, very thin on the palate, and the finish just falls away, but you got alcohol. That was picked on sugar, not on ripeness. So what I do is I wait and I test the vineyard a couple times a week, and then on the first week of October, I did another sample the same way. I look at the seeds, 100% brown seeds, but the sugars are 27 bricks. That's almost a dessert wine. So what happens? I get to play Jesus. So what I do is I whole cluster press the fruit into the tank, and while it's still juice, there's a calculation you can add a certain amount of gallons per volume into the tank to drop it to the desired bricks you want. So I dropped it from 27 to 24, and then I ferment it in the barrel, sur lie, which means I leave the sediment in the barrel, and I put it through primary fermentation, then secondary malolactic fermentation, which eliminates heartburn, because we don't like malic acid, but we make lactic, so lactic is good. And then I stir the leaves once a week in the barrel for 6 months after it goes through secondary fermentation. And that's what gives you that really nice creamy mouthfeel that you get in our Chardonnay. But all that done is done by seed, by ripe fruit. So I do that in every one of the wines that I make. Even the fruit that we buy from our neighbors. I get to pick the rows. I decide when we're gonna pick. Growers don't like that because most people pick a lot earlier than me. But there are ways to get around it without using additives. Because how many times have you all had some red wine and your lips and teeth are purple? What a surprise. One of the most overused additives that we don't use. I do use sulfites though to protect the wine. And it's just the way I do it. It's worked for me. I was a wine collector for about 35 years of white Burgundy, Chardonnays of France, and red Bordeaux. And I would buy futures on warm years because in France it's cooler than it is here in California. So their acidity is a little bit higher, and then ours and our pHs tend to be a little bit higher in California, which is the ripeness. So I found that Chardonnay and white Burgundy was my favorite, and so I kind of tried to learn how to make Chardonnay in that style. And I learned from my mentor. I'm not educated in school like most winemakers. I learned from Kerry Damsky, one of my best friends, and a great mentor and good friend, and an incredible winemaker himself, who has taught me all the tricks, and we still work together occasionally. And he's been my guy.
All right, and on that, we'll close this episode.
All right, cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, have some Chardonnay.
Yeah.